Police emergency.
There's a lady in the car next to me been shot.
Is she alive?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's everywhere. Cheryl Cooper, her name is. Hang on. Cheryl. Cheryl. Cheryl, can you hear me? She's not moving. Just nothing.
That was the moment when the peaceful night in Newport, Shropshire, turned into a nightmare. Cheryl Hooper, a loving mother, friend, and a woman full of life, became the victim of a horrifying act of domestic violence. This is not just another story of loss. It's a story of control, obsession, and the devastating consequences of ignoring the warning signs. Welcome back to Chilling Fireside Stories. As always, I want to thank you for being here, for subscribing, and for supporting this channel as we continue to tell these important stories and raising awareness and making sure that the victims' voices are never forgotten. Before we start, I want to remind you that this case involves sensitive topics including domestic violence. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Now settle in and let's begin. On the night of January 26, 2018, 14-year-old Georgia Hooper was in the car, just inches away from her mother, Cheryl Hooper. Out of nowhere, a familiar and menacing figure, driven by jealousy and rage, emerged and shot Cheryl twice through the windscreen at point-blank range with a double-barreled shotgun. When the police arrived, Georgia, despite being in a state of shock, explained everything.
Is that your mum?
Yeah.
Right, we don't know yet. We'll let the ambulance crew do what they need to do, all right? They're going to be doing. What did you see? What happened? Did you see anything? Come and sit down. What's your name? Come and sit down. What's your name?
Georgia.
Georgia. Is it Georgia, is it? George, sit down, come on. What did you see?
My mum's dead. She was screaming, shouting, Jack, 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 and she couldn't get out the car. I thought he had a spade or a sledgehammer. I didn't see it was a gun until I got round the car and he went like that.
Cheryl Hooper was born in 1967 to Anthony and Rita Gabriel. She grew up in Newport, Shropshire. She attended local schools and later pursued a career in administration. At 37 years old, she had a daughter named Georgia with her first husband. Despite their separation, Cheryl excelled as a mother, always ensuring that Georgia had everything she needed. 2 weeks after Georgia's 7th birthday, Cheryl crossed paths with Andrew Jonathan Hooper, who was affectionately known as Jack by friends and family. Jack was a farmer who owned an extensive 400-acre property near Sutton, complete with an 8-bedroom farmhouse. He had a keen interest in shooting and appreciated life's luxuries. Georgia mentioned that her mother was seeking love and stability, and upon meeting Jack, she believed he could fulfill the roles of both a husband and a father, thus completing their family. When Cheryl introduced her daughter Georgia to Jack and his farm, Georgia was instantly captivated by the surroundings and the animals. She eagerly anticipated this new chapter in their lives. Both Cheryl and Georgia were optimistic about the relationship, with Georgia hoping Jack could be the father figure she had longed for, especially since her biological father had left when she was very young. In the beginning, Jack appeared to be kind, loving, and attentive. Cheryl was thrilled, and Jack's presence brought happiness to her life. He made significant efforts in their relationship, frequently attending events with Cheryl and showering her with luxurious gifts like cars. Jack was a successful man who enjoyed spoiling Cheryl, and over time their bond deepened. 5 years into their relationship, during a romantic weekend in Paris, they became engaged. Cheryl was overjoyed as this was what she had always wanted. Eventually the couple got married. Jack liked to portray himself as the lord of his estate, taking immense pride in having Cheryl by his side. But as time went on, it became clear that neither Cheryl nor her family truly knew the real Jack. After their wedding, Jack's behavior began to change. He frequently went out drinking without Cheryl, becoming increasingly aggressive and controlling. Cheryl's role in the marriage shifted dramatically, reducing her to a lonely housewife expected to manage all household chores. Despite her demanding job as a dental surgery manager, where she worked long hours 5 days a week, Cheryl was responsible for cooking, cleaning, and maintaining their large 8-bedroom farmhouse. The exhaustion from juggling these responsibilities took its toll on Cheryl, but she clung to the hope of finding love and achieving the perfect family life she had always dreamed of. Cheryl Hooper always prioritized her and her daughter's well-being. Although Jack never physically assaulted her, his controlling and possessive nature took a toll. He maintained control through verbal and emotional abuse, often giving Cheryl the silent treatment when she did things he disapproved of, like going out with friends. Consequently, Cheryl stopped socializing and Jack's control extended over her finances. Whenever she challenged him, he intimidated her into submission and threatened harm if she resisted. Jack frequently returned home drunk, and both Cheryl and Georgia quickly learned how to navigate his volatile moods to avoid conflict. As time went on, things deteriorated further, and Cheryl felt increasingly isolated and lonely. Jack's disapproval of Cheryl going out meant that during their 7-year relationship, she rarely socialized with friends. Despite presenting an image of wealth, Jack was actually deeply in debt, and the facade of prosperity masked the true state of their finances. In December 2017, Cheryl managed to enjoy an evening out with her friends, which enraged Jack. He returned home drunk that night and their argument escalated, leading Jack to smash the TV. He then retrieved a gun from his cabinet and began handling it while ascending the stairs. Cheryl was terrified, but fortunately, Jack stormed out of the house in his fury instead of resorting to physical violence. Although he didn't use the gun on her that night, he instilled fear in Cheryl, making her realize he was capable of such acts. At that moment, Cheryl knew she couldn't continue living this way and had to protect herself and her daughter. That night, Cheryl and Georgia left the farmhouse and sought refuge at Cheryl's parents' home. Finally, Cheryl was safe from her abuser and could begin reclaiming her independence, moving forward from the emotional torment she had endured. However, Jack's possessiveness knew no bounds, and he was determined to do anything to express his anger and win Cheryl back. On January 1, 2018, Jack escalated his manipulation by threatening to take his own life. His goal was to make Cheryl feel guilty and compel her to return to him. Despite knowing deep down that she would never go back, being the compassionate person she went to his house to try and prevent him from doing anything drastic. She spent over 2 hours with him, convincing him to put the gun down. Cheryl even went as far as placing her own chin over the gun Jack had aimed at himself, feeling responsible for his potential death. Eventually, Jack relented and put the weapon down, and Cheryl left his home, having successfully prevented him from harming himself. Cheryl's kind-hearted nature led her to care for a man who treated her so poorly, but in reality she should have been more concerned for her own safety, as she was the one truly in danger. In the days that followed, Jack's behavior became increasingly alarming as he began stalking Cheryl. He frequently drove past her parents' home and incessantly called and texted her, desperate to make contact. One evening, Jack took Cheryl's car without her knowledge and installed a GPS tracker to monitor her movements. On January 12, 2018, Cheryl contacted the police to report Jack's erratic behavior and his refusal to leave her and Georgia alone. 2 weeks later, on January 25, 2018, a police officer from the West Mercia Police visited Cheryl and Georgia. The officer informed them that there had been reports of several suicide attempts and threats from Jack after Cheryl refused to return to their home. Concerned that Jack might be a danger to himself, the police reached out to Cheryl to ask critical questions and assess the potential threat. Given Cheryl's earlier report of Jack's erratic behavior, the officer conducted an interview with her and confirmed that Jack's licensed firearms had been confiscated. However, the officer neglected to use a DASH risk assessment checklist, which is designed to evaluate the risk of domestic abuse, stalking, and honor-based violence. This assessment could have determined if Jack posed an imminent threat to Cheryl and her daughter. Following the interview, the officer concluded that Jack was only a danger to himself, as he had only threatened self-harm and not harm towards Cheryl and Georgia. The temporary suspension of his firearms license, however, only intensified Jack's anger. As an avid shooter who organized his own shooting events with friends, losing his guns and his wife left Jack feeling increasingly furious and humiliated. On Friday, January 26, 2018, Cheryl planned a night out with her friend Caroline and a few others. She dropped off her daughter Georgia at a friend's house before heading out for a much-needed evening of fun. During the drive to the pub, Caroline noticed a car trailing them for some time. She pointed it out to Cheryl, saying, "That better not be Jack behind us." Cheryl reassured her, "No, Jack won't know where we've gone." Upon arriving at the pub, Cheryl was in high spirits. She ordered a Prosecco and 3 men joined their group, one of whom was named Ian. The evening began on a positive note, with Cheryl and her friends enjoying themselves. However, the mood shifted dramatically when Jack appeared at the pub. Cheryl felt a tap on her shoulder and turned to see Jack standing there. He remarked, "I should have known you'd be with him," nodding towards Ian. Cheryl took Jack outside to speak privately, where he accused her of having an affair with Ian. Cheryl firmly denied the accusation, insisting she had never cheated on him. Despite her protests, Jack continued to accuse her of infidelity and threatened to divorce her and burn all her belongings. When Jack left the pub, Cheryl quickly texted her daughter to inform her that Jack had shown up and that he might have tracked their car. Trying to salvage the evening, Cheryl returned to the pub to enjoy the rest of her night with friends. In a courageous move, Georgia called Jack, attempting to calm him down and asking him not to burn their belongings and to leave her mother alone. Cheryl then called her father, relaying the same information she had shared with Georgia. Her father advised her to contact the police and to be cautious. Deciding to end her night early, Cheryl dropped off her friend Caroline and then picked up Georgia. They headed back to their rental property, where they had been staying since leaving Jack's house in December 2017. As they arrived home, Jack suddenly appeared holding something concealed by a cloth. Cheryl, attempting to turn off the engine of her Range Rover, screamed, "Oh my God, he's here!" In an instant her window was shattered, and as Cheryl fumbled for her phone to call the police, 2 gunshots rang out, with one fatally striking her neck. Georgia, seated beside her mother during the ambush, witnessed the entire horrifying event. The police were called immediately and Georgia quickly identified the shooter as Jack. Following the tragic incident, an investigation into Cheryl Hooper's murder was promptly initiated. Displaying remarkable courage, Georgia insisted on giving her statement to the police that very evening, despite their suggestion to wait until the next day. She was determined to recount everything immediately.
Your first name?
Georgia.
Georgia, and do you have any middle names, Georgia?
Yeah, May.
Okay, you're 14 at the moment.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about here today, you okay to talk to us right now and here? Okay. Absolutely. And we discussed that outside, didn't we? You know, you've been quite adamant with us that you want to speak to us right now and just get everything over and done with. And that's perfect. So if at any point that it does get a little bit too much for you, okay, just let me know. And I know that it's going to be very, very difficult for you to talk about what's happened today.
It's got to be done.
Georgia detailed how Jack had shot her mother Cheryl in front of their home, and how the haunting memories lingered in her mind. Lead investigator Sergeant Mark Bellamy commended Georgia's bravery that night. Meanwhile, Jack, who had been arrested, was confined to a hospital bed, receiving treatment after his failed suicide attempt. This attempt left him with severe facial deformities, including the loss of his mouth and nose. Due to the extent of his injuries, the police were initially unable to question him about his role in the murder. It wasn't until a long and arduous 10 months into the investigation that Jack regained full consciousness and could be interviewed by the authorities. Jack, who had been unable to speak due to the severity of his facial injuries, was given a paper with letters and options to choose from in response to the questions being asked. After being asked to confirm his name as Andrew Jonathan Hooper, which he said yes to, Jack was asked if he was responsible for the death of his wife Cheryl Gabriel Hooper on January 26, 2018. Jack responded by pointing to the yes option once again.
Are you responsible for the death of your wife, Cheryl Gabriel Hooper, on the 26th of January 2018?
On June 5, 2019, the trial commenced at Birmingham Crown Court in the UK. Andrew Jack Hooper faced charges for the murder of 51-year-old Cheryl Hooper, whom he had killed at close range driven by rage and jealousy. The court was presented with evidence showing that Jack had secretly installed a tracker in Cheryl's Range Rover and had stolen the car at night using his spare keys. It was revealed that Jack had followed Cheryl to the pub on that fateful night, where he accused her of having an affair with Ian before storming off. He then returned home, retrieved an item from his house, concealed it under clothing and placed it in his car. Prosecutor Mason pointed out that the item matched the shape of the shotgun used in the murder. Georgia testified, describing the murderous look in Jack's eyes as he shot her mother. The court also heard testimony from Ian Priest, Cheryl's alleged lover. Cheryl had confided in Ian about Jack's drinking problem and how she felt threatened by his aggressive behavior. Ian also testified about an incident at Cheryl and Jack's home where Jack had smashed the TV and opened his gun cabinet, prompting Cheryl and Georgia to move out in December 2017. The jurors were also informed about Jack's suicide attempt after the murder. Emergency service personnel who responded to Jack's home after Cheryl's death noted it was evident he had tried to take his own life. Sergeant Michael Watersworth testified that Jack had left a suicide note and his will, and had part of his face missing after using the shotgun on himself. During the trial, Jack, seated in a wheelchair and unable to speak due to his injuries, typed out his answers on a keypad. He told the jurors that he only intended to scare Cheryl but admitted to loading the shotgun. The court heard how Jack had taken the 100-year-old antique firearm from his parents' house and that it had been greased up. The gun was in such poor condition that it could have gone off at any time. Jack also claimed that he loved his wife and believed he could save their marriage, even after suspecting Cheryl of having an affair. During cross-examination, Prosecutor David Mason pressed Jack on why he hadn't stayed at the scene or called 999 if he genuinely loved Cheryl. Jack responded that he panicked and attempted to kill himself. He admitted that his intention was to scare Cheryl into leaving other men and reconciling with him. Neighbor Wayne Tranter testified about the events of that fateful night. He recalled hearing two cars pull up while he was preparing for bed. When he looked outside, he saw Jack holding a gun and pointing it towards Cheryl, clearly in a firing position. After the gunshot rang out, Georgia ran towards him, hysterically screaming that Jack had shot her mother. Prosecutor David Mason explained to the jurors that Jack's motive for the crime stemmed from seeing his wife with another man, which drove him to commit a cold-blooded, ruthless, and callous execution. It was also revealed that this wasn't the first time Jack Hooper had threatened a partner's life. In 2004, he received a suspended sentence after breaking into his first wife's home and threatening to kill her. After considering the substantial evidence against Jack, Judge Mark Wall delivered the judgment, emphasizing that this was not a spur-of-the-moment decision but a premeditated execution. On June 21, 2009, the jurors reached a unanimous verdict, finding Andrew Jonathan Jack Hooper guilty and sentencing him to life imprisonment with a minimum of 31 years. After the verdict was delivered, Georgia took the stand to read the victim impact statement. She expressed, "Mom was funny, beautiful, and my best friend. The thought of her not being with me to share my life makes me very sad." The judge also commended her for her bravery and the remarkable way she conducted herself throughout the ordeal, saying, "The way in which you have conducted yourself throughout this trial, which must have been extremely difficult for you, has been admirable and awe-inspiring. Your mother would have no doubt been immensely proud of the way you have dealt with this tragic and difficult process." Shortly after Cheryl's death, several tributes were paid to her by friends, family, and colleagues. Her colleagues also set up a crowdfunding page for donations to support her daughter, Georgia. The devastating experience gave Georgia flashbacks, insomnia, and post-traumatic stress. She said she really withdrew herself from the world after it happened. "I just completely withdrew and struggled to survive. I stopped eating and sleeping. It was really bad." In the years since her mother's tragic death, Georgia has dedicated herself to preventing domestic abuse and advocating for victims. She tirelessly campaigns to raise awareness about domestic abuse and fights for comprehensive training for police officers nationwide, ensuring they can effectively address and prevent such cases. Georgia has also been a strong advocate for a national register of abuse offenders, believing that such a system could have potentially saved her mother by revealing Jack's history of abuse. Georgia expressed, living with a narcissist and psychopath gives you a unique perspective on identifying and exposing them. I want to make a difference. If I succeed, it means that man hasn't won. I've always been labeled as a witness or a victim, but I'm neither. I'm a bright young woman with a life of my own, and I refuse to be defined by this hate crime. Before I finish, I want to take a moment to talk about something incredibly important: domestic violence. It's a topic that doesn't get nearly the attention it deserves, and it's crucial to understand that domestic violence isn't just about punching or hitting. It's not always physical. Sometimes the scars it leaves aren't visible. It's about power and control, making someone feel small, worthless, and trapped. It's mental and emotional abuse, isolating a person from their friends, family, and even their own identity. It's a slow, calculated process of alienation, making the victim feel like they have nowhere to turn. We need to remember that domestic violence can happen to anyone: women, men, children, anyone. It doesn't discriminate based on gender, age, or background. Abuse thrives in secrecy and shame, and it's up to us as a society to break that silence. There are red flags we should all be aware of. If someone constantly controls your every move, isolates you from your loved ones, or makes you feel guilty for trying to maintain relationships, those are major warning signs. If they exhibit excessive jealousy, put you down, or make you feel like nothing you do is good enough, take those signs seriously. Abuse isn't always obvious at first. It often starts small and escalates over time. But it's not normal and it's not okay. Other red flags include financial control, where the abuser dictates how money is spent or prevents the victim from working, and threats or intimidation, like using fear to manipulate or control. Even unpredictable anger or mood swings can be a sign that something is wrong. If you feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells, it's time to evaluate what's happening. If any of this sounds familiar, whether in your own life or someone else's, please don't ignore it. It's easy to think, it's not that bad, or things will get better, but the reality is that abuse doesn't go away on its own. It's okay to ask for help. In fact, it's brave to ask for help. Reach out to someone you trust, whether it's a friend, family member, or a support organization. There is help out there, and you don't have to go through this alone. Cheryl Hooper's story is a heartbreaking reminder of the consequences of unchecked abuse. She made the brave decision to leave, but even then her abuser's need for control didn't stop. Her story isn't just a tragedy, it's a call to action. We need to take domestic violence seriously. We need to look out for one another. And we need to educate ourselves on what abuse really looks like so we can stop it before it escalates. Let's honor Cheryl's memory by spreading awareness and standing against domestic violence. If you or someone you know is in danger, please don't wait. Reach out to a domestic violence hotline or a trusted organization. As always, I will leave all the necessary contacts and links to related organizations in the description. Thank you for watching this video. If Cheryl's story resonated with you, please share it with others or leave a comment. Any red flags you've experienced and would like to share with others. Until my next video, please stay informed, stay safe, and look after your loved ones.